Sometimes significant moments happen in seemingly ordinary situations. These moments put the present on a path that has followed for decades, if not forever. Nintendo has done this multiple times during its history. But one decision to revise a current console would be the design for all further consoles in that lineage. Its impact is still visible today. It happened one February day in 2003. 2 years earlier, Nintendo released the Game Boy Advance, a highly sophisticated handheld that changed things up dramatically for the Game Boy line. It was no longer a brick shape. The form factor was in landscape mode, versus the traditional portrait layout of Game Boys past. But the most significant change was in the graphics. The games this little handheld could run looked stunning. It was like having a tiny, portable Super Nintendo. At this time, the Super Nintendo had only been out of production for 6 years. To have that big of a leap in portable graphics was astonishing. Compare these graphics to the Game Boy Color and you'll see just how advanced the Game Boy Advance was. It was the best Game Boy to ever be produced up to that point. It checked off all the boxes when it came to a handheld system. It was first and foremost comfortable. You could play this thing for hours with no discomfort. The shape of the body was contoured to fit the natural curve of your hand. The shoulder buttons, a first for a portable Nintendo console, were big and chunky. They were easy to find when they were required. Again, the graphics were amazing. The games would pop not only in resolution but also in color. The colors were so vibrant versus what had come before. Also, the amount of colors was increased significantly. The Game Boy Color could display 16 colors on a small screen. The Game Boy Advance displayed 511 simultaneous colors out of a palette of 65,535. It truly was a monumental leap for handheld gaming. But it didn't stop there. There was one more trick up the Game Boy Advance's sleeve. It was backwards compatible with every Game Boy game from the original model to the Game Boy Color. It was like having 3 Game Boy systems all in one shell. It was a dream come true. And it also added color to those non-color games. It was truly magic when it came to this console. But there was one caveat to the GBA. If you wanted to play it, you had to do so in a very well-lit room. It was manufactured with a screen that requires light to be reflected back at the player in order to see the gameplay. The exact style of screen the Game Boy, Game Boy Pocket, and Game Boy Color had. The same tech that was used back on the original model in 1989. This was 2002, and I'm surprised people were okay with it. It's actually quite dark. I'm surprised I was okay with it. I remember being very put out having to use those third-party lights in order to get a good view of my games. It was something I struggled with throughout the entirety of my handheld gaming life, so when I think about it, it was nothing new. That's probably why I was okay having to use these dumb peripherals. I went on so many trips in the backseat of my parents' car where I struggled to play anything without this twisty light blocking my view. The Game Boy Advance also runs on 2 AA batteries. I'm still on the fence about this. I like it, and I don't like it at the same time. I don't like packing around batteries, but I like not having to worry about plugging it in every time the batteries get low. This isn't a huge deal, but it's worth noting. Little did I know, Nintendo would revolutionize its latest gaming console, for better and for worse. It came with 2 letters at the end of its name. Those letters are SP. That's right, the Game Boy Advance SP, or GBA SP as it's come to be known as. It threw out most of the changes the Game Boy Advance introduced to the line, but added a handful more. The biggest and most obvious change Nintendo implemented was the form factor. Instead of the landscape approach, it now folded up. This is crazy. The screen is on the top and the buttons are on the bottom. This design, which later became known as the clamshell design, not only saved space, but it also saved the buttons from unnecessary wear, as well as the screen from being susceptible to scratches. To this day, most GBA SPs have screens that are scratch-free. It looked like a tiny laptop. This Onyx version especially looks like a little computer. When you unfold it, it resembles the old layout of traditional Game Boy models. Also, look at how small this thing is. You could literally throw this thing in your pocket. I always had one in my bag because of how small it was. I love how GBA games fit oh so perfectly in the cartridge slot, creating a flush edge with the console. Though original Game Boy games and Game Boy Color games look as ridiculous on this as they did on the original Game Boy Advance. Another game-changing feature was the rechargeable battery. This little device can play anywhere from 7 hours up to 18 hours on a single charge. This is an amazing amount of time. Compare that to my new 3DS XL, it only gets 3.5 hours to 7 hours. That barely reaches the lowest amount of playtime on the GBA SP. Compare that to my original Switch, and the GBA SP looks even better. But that's not all the new redesign added to the Game Boy Advance. The biggest and most dreamt about feature was finally a reality. They put a light on the screen. After all those years of trying to play games on a Game Boy in the dark, only to be met with compromised and half-lit screens, we were finally able to see what we were doing in the dark. I know it's commonplace to see screens lit with their own lights, but this was a brand new addition for a Nintendo handheld. Well, there was a Game Boy Light, but that wasn't released in North America. I can't explain into words how big of a leap forward this was. It was an absolute game changer. You can play not only your GBA games, but now original Game Boy and Game Boy Color games were playable on a lit screen. As great as it is playing on a lit screen, this type of lit screen is a little compromised. It's front lit, meaning the light shines on the front of the display. This type of lighting washes out the image. The reason it was implemented on this model was to give it options. There's a button right below the screen in the center. This button toggles the light on and off. This display is meant to be played with a light and without a light. You can still play this thing in the daytime with reflected light. It's great for conserving battery, but poor for image quality. But who cares, right? This was the best way to play Game Boy games at the time. I personally never heard anybody complain about it when it was released. Back then, having a cell phone was a luxury and were only meant for phone calls. Their screens were worse than the SPs. It was easy to put up with it at the time. I was just happy to have a built-in light. Nintendo wasn't done tinkering with the Game Boy Advance after these revisions. The best part of the SP was about to be even better. A little over 2 years later, a new model of Game Boy Advance SP was rolled out. It wasn't hyped or even advertised from what I can remember. It was quietly stocked on store shelves and bought by people who were in the know or by those who were lucky to be in the market for one. This new Game Boy Advance SP looks and feels exactly like the original SP. Everything is relatively the same, except for the screen. This new display is significantly better than any other Game Boy display ever released. It is backlit. You flip the power switch and watch the title screen animation roll in with all its glorious colors. The image is crisp and vibrant, but this isn't as good as it gets. Press the light button on this model, and instead of the light turning off, it gets even brighter. This is the best it gets. All games look better on this screen on this setting. Once you go all in, you'll never go back. Even going back to the dimmer setting is difficult. It just looks so good on the brightest setting. The backlit model is leaps and bounds better than any other version of this handheld. These games have never looked so good. Even better than how they look on the Game Boy player for the GameCube, which softens the image considerably. It's known as the GBA SP AGS 101 because of the model number on the back. If you're looking to buy an original Game Boy Advance, I'd say look for this model. It's something most people know today, but it was quite unknown around 10 years ago that there were two different SP models. I used to grab them used for around $10 to $30. I bought many of them during this time. I knew there would be a time where I wouldn't be able to find them, and that time is now. I really don't see them anymore. When I do find them, they are usually very high priced, well over $100. The Game Boy Advance SP went out of production around 2010, but its impact is still visible today. The folded clamshell design was an integral part of the next family of handheld systems. The DS was introduced as a third pillar alongside the Game Boy line and the GameCube. It featured a new game card slot at the top along with a slot that plays Game Boy Advance games on the bottom. And that slot only plays Game Boy Advance games. This was a serious drawback because the backwards compatibility of the SP was a reason to own that console. But that could be overlooked. As long as you owned a GBA SP, you could still play all the games on a lit screen. The clamshell design proceeded to live on in the next iteration of the DS and DS Lite. In my opinion, the best version of the DS. It's smaller and used less angles than the original. But the folded design didn't end there. The DSi and the DSi XL both had it. If you like this look and function, there's good news, because their next console also used the same design. The 3DS family of consoles, with exception to the 2DS, all have the clamshell design, right up to the latest version that is still on store shelves. The new 2DS XL is the final console that supports the clamshell design, the design that influenced so much. It's incredible to think that it's been around for 17 years. This is a testament to how well it functions. It really made these consoles portable. It's ultra space saving, literally cutting down half the space the console would have taken up. You could really throw them in your pocket and have them with you at all time. This is until they release the XL versions. There's no way I'm packing one of these things in my pocket. As mentioned earlier, it also protected the buttons and screens. I love this. You didn't have to have a case, even though most people used one anyway. It's very rare when an idea takes hold and influences the future for so long. What happened when the SP was released was a very important moment in gaming history. I would say one of the most important moments for Nintendo. It was a starting point to so many things that would become synonymous with the company. The clamshell design was so important to all future handhelds, right up until the Switch Lite was released. It really was a landmark design. The screen being lit was monumental for handheld gaming going forward. Once you play those games with a backlit screen, there's no going back to the old reflective screens. I know some prefer the old way, but in my honest opinion, it's a massive step back from the progress the GBA SP made. Sometimes significant moments happen in seemingly ordinary situations. These moments put the present on a path that is followed for decades, if not forever. Nintendo has done this multiple times during its history, but one decision to revise a current console would be the design for all further consoles in that lineage. Its impact is still visible today, which is a testament to how monumental the Game Boy Advance SP is.